Emily Rodriguez vanished between classes on a Tuesday afternoon. Not mysteriously, not dramatically. She simply stopped existing in one moment and never appeared in the next. At exactly 2:47 p.m., the gymnasium doors slammed shut. That was the last moment anyone saw Emily's reflection in the polished hallway floor. Detective Sarah Chen stood in that exact spot now, staring at the 30-foot corridor connecting the math wing to the cafeteria. 30 feet of empty space, 5 minutes of time, 5 minutes that would change everything about how Sarah understood consciousness, identity, and what it meant to be human. Principal Marcus had been scrolling through the security footage when Sarah arrived. His hands were shaking. He looked like a man who had seen something impossible. He said she went to the bathroom during class change, 2:42 p.m. She left room 304. Room 312 has no record of her entering. That was the first inconsistency, the first crack in reality. But to understand what happened to Emily Rodriguez, we need to go back further. We need to understand what Emily had said the week before, what she told her best friend Marcus, what she didn't understand herself until it was far too late. Emily had said just 4 words. 4 words that meant nothing at the time. 4 words that meant everything. She said, "I can't remember Thursday. Not Thursday was bad. Not Thursday was complicated. But I can't remember Thursday." Like someone had torn out a page from a calendar. Like a day had simply been erased. Where was she really going? Why did no one look for her immediately? And most importantly, who was hiding something so dark it required making time disappear? The security camera in hallway 3C had captured something that should have been impossible. At 2:44 p.m., Emily walked past the water fountain. Her reflection was visible in the floor's shine. Her shadow hit the wall perfectly. 2 seconds later, at 2:46 p.m., the exact same section of hallway, Emily's phone in her hand, and then at 2:47 p.m., the gymnasium doors closed behind her. Except Emily never entered the gymnasium. The gym had been locked. Maintenance was working inside. Principal Marcus checked the sign-out sheet himself. It was completely empty for that entire period. No one had entered after 2:15 p.m. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. The search team had found something in the parking lot. Not Emily. Something worse. Emily's boyfriend, Daniel, hadn't come to school that day. Well, he wasn't technically her boyfriend anymore. They had broken up 3 weeks ago. Emily told her parents it was mutual. Daniel told his mother it was because Emily had been acting strange, like she didn't know him sometimes, like she was looking at someone familiar and seeing a stranger. The tow truck operator had called it in at 3:15 p.m. The car was wedged against the loading dock behind Riverside Auto Center, the same auto center that sat exactly 1.3 miles from the high school. The same auto center where Daniel's uncle Robert Chen had worked as the head mechanic for the last 15 years. The driver's side door was open. The car was Daniel's mother's Subaru. On the driver's seat, in perfect condition, lay Emily's backpack. Her ID was still inside. Her house keys, her phone, powered off, but still there. Everything she would need to prove she existed. Everything she would need except an explanation for why she would be in that car at all. Sarah interviewed Daniel at the police station. He was 17, lanky, with nervous energy that came from being questioned by a detective. His lawyer, his mother, sat beside him with her arms crossed. Daniel said, "I wasn't at school. I had a doctor's appointment. I didn't meet Emily anywhere. We don't even talk anymore." Sarah slid a photograph across the table. It was from 3 days ago, pulled from his Instagram story. He was at the auto center, Robert Chen's workplace. Another girl stood beside him, and they were standing next to a lifted truck. Sarah said flatly, "You go to your uncle's workplace." "It's my uncle. I work there sometimes." Summer job stuff. Your uncle. Emily's car is at your uncle's workplace. Daniel's face went pale. His hands started shaking. His lawyer put a hand on his arm, but it didn't help. He looked guilty of something. Even if it wasn't kidnapping, he looked guilty of something. I don't know how it got there, Daniel said. I swear to God, I don't know. But his hands kept shaking. The need had shifted. This wasn't a missing person case anymore. This was something else, something darker, something that required Sarah to stop asking where Emily went and start asking who was lying about why. Sarah pulled the security footage from the auto center. Robert Chen ran a tight operation. Cameras on the lot, cameras on the garage, cameras on the service entrance. The footage should have been clear. But the timestamps were wrong. One camera showed 2:14 p.m. jumping directly to 2:58 p.m., 44 minutes erased, gone. In that gap, in those missing minutes, someone had placed Emily's car on the loading dock. Someone had placed her backpack inside. Someone had wanted it to be found. The question wasn't where Emily went anymore. The question was, who made sure everyone would know she was here? The next morning, Emily's mother received a text message. Not from Emily, from Emily's phone, which was locked in police evidence. The message said, "I'm okay. Don't look for me. I'm okay." Sarah received the notification at 8:47 a.m. She was at the police station, holding a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The message had come through at 8:15 a.m. The phone had been powered off since 3 p.m. the previous day. The battery was completely dead. It was impossible, which meant someone had charged it. Someone had turned it on. Someone had access to it between the time it was placed in the evidence locker and 8:15 this morning. The evidence locker that was locked. The locker that only 3 people had keys to. One of those people was Officer Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb was Emily's best friend's older brother. Marcus Webb had worked at Riverside High as a security guard for 2 years before joining the police department. He had been part of this place. He had walked these hallways. Sarah brought him in. Marcus said immediately, "I didn't touch her phone. It was in evidence. I just worked dispatch now." "You have a key to the locker," Sarah said. "Everyone does. Half the department has." Everyone doesn't have access at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. You clocked in at 7:12 a.m. The phone was charged between 7 and 8:15 a.m. Marcus leaned back in his chair. His jaw tightened. For a moment, Sarah thought he would break. But then he said, "I want a lawyer." That wasn't an admission. But it was close. Very close. The discovery made everything stop. Emily's best friend was Marcus Webb's younger brother Jordan. Jordan, who Sarah had already interviewed. Jordan, who said Emily had been acting off for the past month. Jordan, who said Emily sometimes looked at him like she didn't recognize him. Sarah pulled Marcus Webb's file. He had worked at Riverside High from 2019 to 2022. During that time, 3 students had disappeared, not permanently. They had all returned within days, completely confused, reporting lost time. The school had chalked it up to runaways seeking attention. But they all reported the same thing. They couldn't remember specific days, full days just gone. Like pages torn from a calendar, just like Emily. 3 years ago, one of those 3 students had been Emily herself. Back in 2021, she had been missing for 6 hours. She had told her parents she went to visit a friend across town. The friend had confirmed it. Emily's location data had confirmed it. But no one could remember Emily actually arriving. The friend said Emily had texted that she was coming over, but she didn't actually see Emily until she left. Ticking clock. 12 hours after Emily disappeared, she sent a text from a dead phone. 18 hours after that, The police realized someone on the inside had done it. 24 hours after the initial disappearance, there was a conspiracy. Sarah pulled Marcus Webb's security logs from his time at the school. She was about to start analyzing them when Principal Marcus called. His voice was different, scared. He said, "They found something in the crawl space above the gym. Detective, you need to get back here right now." The crawl space contained 7 computers, 7 industrial-grade servers, networked together, hidden in a space that measured 10 feet by 15 feet. They were running on a dedicated power line, professional installation, professional concealment. The hard drives were completely full, terabytes of data, video files, everything organized and labeled. Classroom footage, hallway footage, all from inside Riverside High, all with timestamps, all labeled with student names and dates. Robert Chen had been installing security systems at the school for 15 years. He had a key card. He had access. He had installed the cameras. But these servers weren't part of the school's official system. They were private, someone's private collection. The IT specialist said, "How long has this been running?" Judging by the file dates and the accumulated data, he replied slowly, "Minimum of 5 years, possibly longer." Trusted person, acting suspicious. Robert Chen called his lawyer the moment police arrived at the auto center. Before they could explain what they had found, before they could tell him about the servers, he knew, somehow, he already knew. The footage in those servers wasn't just surveillance. It was organized, categorized. Sections were labeled anomalies. Moments where students seemed confused, disoriented, where they moved like they were in a daze. Emily appeared in 47 separate clips. So did hundreds of other students. But what made the footage disturbing was the editing. Someone had gone through it methodically and edited out sections, time jumps, just like the auto center footage, just like Emily's phone charging itself in a dead evidence locker. Someone was very good at making time disappear. Sarah sat across from Robert Chen in an interrogation room at 11 p.m. Robert didn't deny anything. He didn't ask for his lawyer. He just looked tired, defeated, like a man carrying a secret too heavy for one person. He said, "I didn't hurt anyone. That's what you need to understand. I never hurt anyone." "You recorded hundreds of students without consent," Sarah said. "I was looking for something specific." "For what?" Robert was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Emily Rodriguez went to my workplace. Twice. 3 months ago. And then again yesterday. Except she was already here, wasn't she? She never went anywhere." Sarah leaned forward. The words didn't make sense, but her instincts told her she needed to understand them. She needed to understand them very badly. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "The Emily I saw yesterday at my shop," Robert said. "She was different, not just in her behavior. Her mannerisms were different. The way she held her phone was different. Even her voice was slightly different, like someone doing an impression of Emily, but getting 90% of it right." Sarah's blood went cold. She felt the case shifting beneath her feet, moving in a direction that didn't feel real. "Are you saying there are 2 Emilys?" Sarah asked. "I'm saying I think you have 2 Emilys," Robert said, "and I think one of them has been at my shop, and one of them has been at school, and I think they're not supposed to know about each other." The next morning, police released photos of Emily Rodriguez, asking the public to report any sightings. Within 4 hours, they had 17 reports. Emily had been seen at the shopping mall on Tuesday at 1 p.m., the hospital parking lot on Wednesday at 3 p.m., the community college on Thursday at 10 a.m., the beach on Friday at sunset. The sightings were spread across the entire county. They covered impossible distances. They spanned overlapping time periods. Emily had been in 2 places at the same time, multiple times. Everything pointed to one impossible conclusion. There were multiple Emilys. An alert came through from the state police database. Robert Chen's name flagged a hit on a DNA database. His profile had been submitted by his employer years ago as part of a workplace background check. But the hit wasn't just a match, it was a paternity match. Robert had fathered a child that had been registered at birth but never claimed. The child had been born 16 years ago. The child's name was listed as Emily R. The implication was immediate and seductive. Robert Chen had a daughter. He had been keeping her hidden. He had been training her to impersonate the real Emily. He had orchestrated the entire disappearance. Police moved to arrest him, but Sarah had learned to listen to the small voice that whispered wrong. The DNA database record was too clean, too perfect, too easily found. Someone had wanted that record to surface. Someone had made sure it would be discovered within hours of the Emily sightings. Sarah went back to the server footage. She watched the timestamps again. She noticed a pattern. Every single time the timestamps jumped, every time there was that impossible gap, it happened in the same location, hallway 3C, outside the gym. The camera in that hallway blinked to black for exactly 44 seconds. Every single time. Sarah was pulling the technical specifications for that camera when Officer Marcus Webb was arrested. He had tried to leave town. He had cash. He had a fake ID. He had a burner phone with 17 calls to Robert Chen. Sarah demanded answers. Why were you calling Robert? Marcus's face was unreadable. I want my lawyer. Your brother's best friend is missing. Your brother is terrified, and you're running. Why? Marcus looked at her with resignation. Because I know what's actually happening, and nobody's going to believe you when I tell you, so I'm getting as far away as I can. Then before his lawyer shut him up, Marcus said, you should ask Emily which day she actually disappeared. Ask her which Tuesday she left from. Because I don't think she knows. The second Emily was found on Sunday morning. She was at Riverside Medical Center, checking into the psychiatric ward. She had walked up to the front desk and said, I'm Emily Rodriguez. I need to report myself as a danger to others. The intake nurse called the police immediately. This Emily was identical to the first Emily. Exactly identical. Not similar. Not close. Identical. Same height. Same weight. Same dental records. Same fingerprints. Same DNA. The nurse had asked, are you the real Emily? The second Emily had smiled sadly. I'm the one who remembers disappearing. In the interrogation room, the second Emily explained. She said they had 36 hours before something happened again. That was the cycle. Every 36 hours, it reset. Sarah asked slowly, every time. How many times has this happened? I don't know. I can't remember most of them. But I can remember this one. This is the first time I'm awake for it. A neurologist examined both Emily's. Their brain scans told a story that shouldn't have been possible. The second Emily's brain showed unusual patterns in specific regions. The first Emily's scans taken during a school physical 2 months ago showed completely normal patterns. The neurologist said quietly, someone has modified the second Emily's brain, not invasively. This isn't open brain surgery, but there's evidence of neuromodulation, possibly transcranial magnetic stimulation, or something more advanced, something designed to induce controlled memory loss and restoration. Sarah received a letter at the police station. It was typed, unsigned, hand-delivered. It contained one sentence. You have the wrong Emily. The one you should be looking for never went to the auto center. The investigation turned inward. Sarah reviewed the school's employee records. Every single person had been background checked. But she found something, a gap. From 2016 to 2018, there had been a substitute teacher listed on the payroll. His name was David Marsh. No social security number. No previous employment history. No exit record, like he had been hired and then erased from history. David Marsh's name appeared on 47 substitute teaching logs. "Who is David Marsh?" Sarah asked Principal Marcus. "I don't know the name," Principal Marcus said, but his face went very still. "You signed off on hiring him in 2016. "I don't remember a David Marsh." Sarah recognized the specific flavor of fear in his voice. It wasn't fear of legal consequences. It was fear of remembering something that had been deliberately erased. Sarah interviewed 300 students. She asked them one specific question. "Do you remember a teacher named David Marsh?" Out of 1,200 students, 847 gave the same answer. "No, but I feel like I should." The remaining 353 had no memory of high school at all. When questioned about specific years and classes and events, their eyes went blank. They described it as white space, entire years of their lives replaced with white space. A photograph arrived at Sarah's house on Tuesday night. It was Sarah sleeping in her bed. She lived alone. Her apartment was locked. There were no signs of forced entry. The photograph was dated 2 days ago at 3:47 a.m. Sarah had been asleep. She hadn't woken up. The note said, "You're asking the wrong questions. Stop looking for Emily. Start looking in the mirror. Do you remember yesterday? Do you remember what you did yesterday?" Sarah's hands shook. She did remember yesterday. She remembered interviewing 3 teachers. She remembered getting coffee. She remembered driving to the hospital. Except when she pulled up her credit card transactions, there was a charge from 2 to 4 p.m. at a location in her phone's GPS history that she didn't recognize. A medical center, 40 miles away. She had a 2-hour gap yesterday. She hadn't even known it was there until the photograph made her look. 3 other detectives reported memory gaps. Emily's best friend went missing from his bedroom and reappeared 6 hours later with no memory of leaving. A hospital nurse called with her own story. 6 patients had undergone treatment. All of them reported the same thing. Time travel. Not metaphorical time travel. Literal reports of being in one place and then suddenly being in another, with no memory of the transition. Sarah sat with the second Emily again. Sarah asked, "How many of us are there?" "I don't know," Emily said. "But the first time I became aware I was aware, there were at least 3 of me. We didn't know each other. We kept running into ourselves, and it broke the system. That's when things started falling apart. That's when I didn't get the memory wipe." "The memory wipe? You remember getting it?" "I remember the needle. I remember the room. It looked like an office, sterile. There was a man. I never saw his face clearly, but he had a voice like a teacher, like someone used to explaining things." Sarah pulled the architectural plans for Riverside High. She had a team search every wall, every closet, every utility space. They found it in the basement. The room was hidden behind a locked maintenance door. Inside were 3 neuromodulation chairs, the kind used in hospitals, in research facilities, in places where serious medical equipment was expensive and carefully licensed. These weren't licensed. The equipment was connected to a central computer. The computer's hard drive had been wiped, but the IT team recovered partial files from the fragments. The files were labeled Neuro Mapping Protocol, Neuro Mapping Protocol B, Memory Reconstruction Suite, Identity Fragmentation Module. Patient logs dated back to 2018. Patient names were replaced with numbers. Subject 001, Subject 002, Subject 003. Sarah called in the FBI. The FBI's behavioral analyst, Dr. Raymond Foster, reviewed everything: the servers, the equipment, the memory gaps, the neuromodulation chairs. He spent 4 hours in the basement, and then he called Sarah into a conference room. "This isn't the work of one person," he said. "And Robert Chen isn't your architect. He's a tool." "A tool for what?" "For a research project. Someone has been experimenting on the student population for years, testing neuromodulation techniques, testing consciousness fragmentation, testing memory reconstruction, and they've been doing it on children." "Who?" Dr. Foster showed her a personnel file. "School psychologist. Active since 2011. The name was Dr. James Elliott." Sarah knew Dr. Elliott. Everyone knew Dr. Elliott. He ran the school's counseling program. He had been there for 13 years. He had given the commencement speech at Emily's freshman orientation. He was the person every student trusted. He was the person parents thanked for helping their kids through tough times. "He's been doing this for 13 years?" Sarah asked. "Probably longer. He likely started at other schools. Riverside High is his long-term project. Because he's embedded so deeply. He's the psychologist. He's trusted. He can prescribe medication. He can order psychological evaluations. He can recommend students for special programs. And no one questions him. Because he's helping children." Sarah brought in Dr. Elliott for questioning. He admitted everything immediately. Not because he had been caught, but because he wanted her to understand. "I'm not a criminal," Elliott said. "I'm a researcher. I've been working on something revolutionary. Do you understand what consciousness is? Do you understand that we could potentially expand it, create backup consciousness profiles, allow someone to experience multiple selves simultaneously? This research will change human existence." "You're torturing children." "I'm advancing science." These students volunteered. They didn't volunteer. They can't consent. Elliott leaned forward. "Did you know that Subject 001, Emily Rodriguez, was referred to me by her own mother? Did you know that her mother asked me specifically if there was anything I could do about Emily's depression, about her anxiety? Did you know that I offered her a solution, and her mother said yes?" "How many students have you experimented on?" Sarah asked. "Hundreds. Over 13 years. Maybe more." "Why?" "Because consciousness is the final frontier. Because if we can understand and manipulate it, we can solve every psychological problem, every trauma, every disorder. We can create better versions of ourselves. We can experience multiple lives in one body." "You're insane." "I'm a visionary," Elliott said. "And in 10 years I'll be celebrated for this work. I'll be celebrated because I'll have proven that human consciousness is not fixed, that identity is not singular, that we can be more than we are." Sarah finally understood what the multiple Emilys meant. They weren't different people. They were Emily experiencing different versions of herself simultaneously. Her consciousness had been fragmented, backed up, restored, altered. She had been living parallel experiences in the same body, at different times. Elliott said, 18 hours before you start forgetting this conversation, unless you voluntarily undergo the neuromodulation, you'll have natural memory degradation. That's the insurance. That's how this stays secret. The investigators start forgetting. The witnesses start forgetting. The evidence gets lost in the white space. Sarah's hands went cold. "I did it to you already," Elliott said. 48 hours ago. You came to me for a headache. I gave you a mild neurological treatment, just enough to create susceptibility, just enough to make sure that when this ends, you'll move on. You'll forget most of this. You'll remember just enough to let it go. Sarah requested immediate neurological scans. The scans showed evidence of the same neuromodulation markers that the second Emily had. The procedure had been done to her without consent. Elliott had literally tampered with her consciousness while she sat across from him seeking help for a headache. Police arrested Dr. James Elliott. FBI took custody. Evidence was seized. Case closed. The news reported it as a victory. The district superintendent assured parents that this was an isolated incident, contained and handled. Except then Sarah found the document. It was hidden in Elliot's office files, encrypted and discovered only because the second Emily mentioned a folder. The document was a timeline. It showed neuromodulation procedures dating back to 2005, 13 years earlier than Elliot's hire date at Riverside High, 13 years at other schools, 5 different school districts, at least 3 different states, and a list of 15 names listed as co-researchers and assistants. One of those names was Principal Marcus. Another was the school nurse, Patricia Hammond. Another was the assistant superintendent of Riverside School District. Another was a federal researcher at the Department of Education. There's more. It's bigger than one psychologist. It's institutional. The co-researchers were detained. Principal Marcus, Nurse Hammond, the assistant superintendent, and 3 others. They all lawyered up immediately. They all refused to speak, but the evidence was damning. Emails, meeting notes, research proposals, funding records. Someone had been funding this. The money trail led to a nonprofit called the Neurological Advancement Initiative. It was registered in Delaware. Its stated mission was advancing human consciousness research through innovative medical techniques. Its actual mission appeared to be creating a network of researchers in school districts across the country who could experiment on student populations without oversight. The second Emily said, 6 hours before the next cycle reset. But if you trigger it manually by disconnecting me from the neuromodulation network, it gets unstable. I could fragment. All the versions of me that exist across different memory profiles could separate. What happens if you fragment? Sarah asked. I don't know. No one's ever lived through it. The federal investigation widened. The FBI discovered that the Neurological Advancement Initiative had connections in 47 school districts, each one with a research psychologist embedded, each one with students who reported memory gaps, each one with underground neuromodulation labs. This wasn't a conspiracy. This was a national program. Sarah's phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Dr. Foster from the FBI. Don't go to the police station. Don't trust anyone in your chain of command. Principal Marcus wasn't just a researcher. He was department liaison, meaning someone higher up authorized this. Who? I don't know yet, but they're good at erasing connections, memories, evidence, people. Sarah received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice was professional, calm, educational. Detective Chen, I'm calling to offer you a choice. Who is this? Someone you'll forget meeting once you hang up. Someone who helped oversee the Neurological Advancement Initiative for the past 9 years. Someone who's very good at making problems disappear. I'm not a problem. I'm law enforcement. You were, until you agreed to undergo neuromodulation treatment with Dr. Elliot, until you allowed him access to your neural pathways. Once you've been modified, detective, you stop having law enforcement authority. You become a security liability, a potential data leak. Sarah's apartment went dark. She heard movement in her kitchen. 2 figures, maybe 3. She reached for her phone, but her hands weren't responding correctly. The neuromodulation was starting to activate. She could feel it. The humming sound Elliot had mentioned. It was in her head. She ran. The next 6 hours were a blur. She abandoned her car. She ditched her phone. She moved through the city like someone being hunted because she was being hunted. The neuromodulation in her head was getting stronger, and she could feel it, like something had taken residence behind her eyes. She went to the hospital to find the second Emily. The second Emily was gone. Her bed was empty. Discharge papers were signed by Dr. James Elliot himself. Sarah's vision blurred. The humming was getting louder. She had maybe 2 hours before the full activation. 2 hours before she became like the others. 2 hours before her consciousness fractured into versions of herself that didn't know each other. There was a file on the second Emily's nightstand, a discharge form that had been hastily filled out. In the medication list, written in Elliot's handwriting, was a phone number, a contact, someone who could reverse the neuromodulation, someone who was part of the system, but not completely part of it. Sarah called the number with a stolen phone. A woman answered. Dr. Patricia Hammond, the school nurse, the co-researcher. I was wondering when you'd call. I've been waiting for someone to reach out. I've been waiting for 12 years, for someone to realize what we're doing is wrong. How do I stop it? Sarah asked. You don't. Not once it's been activated, but I can delay it. I can give you time. Time to find Emily. Time to find the real one. The original Emily. The one Elliot's been keeping at the federal facility. Why would you help me? Hammond's voice cracked. Because I have a daughter. 3 years ago, she went through the program. She came out fragmented. She came out as 4 different versions of herself that don't know how to be one person, and I realized I was part of something monstrous. 2 hours, Hammond said. That's how long before the neuromodulation reaches critical activation. After that, you'll fragment, and they'll have you. Hammond gave Sarah coordinates. A private medical facility 40 miles outside the city, hidden in the mountains, registered under a shell corporation, the kind of place that didn't exist on any public record. Sarah drove. She was barely conscious. The humming was overwhelming. She could feel it happening, her consciousness splitting, diverging, creating branches. She was driving, and at the same time, she was also standing outside the car, watching herself drive. 2 instances of awareness, not quite synchronized. The facility was white concrete, sterile, empty, except for one room. Inside that room were 5 neuromodulation chairs. In 4 of the chairs sat Emily, the same face, but different postures, different ages even. One looked slightly older, one slightly younger, one in various states of dissociation. In the 5th chair sat a girl Sarah didn't recognize. Dark hair, olive skin, around 16. She was crying, her hands shaking. And in the center of the room, at a control console, sat Dr. James Elliot. Detective Chen, you made better time than I expected. The neuromodulation's progressing faster in your system because you have higher cognitive capacity than our typical subjects. You should be fragmenting within minutes. Where's the original Emily? Sarah asked. Her voice was distorted. She could hear herself speaking and hear herself not speaking. You're looking at her. All of them. The original Emily Rodriguez was subject 001. We've been running continuous consciousness, cycling through her for 5 years. Each of these instances represents a different memory profile, a different version of Emily occupying the same biological body at different times. That's not possible. It's not just possible. It's revolutionary. We've created serial consciousness. We've proven that the self is not singular, that identity is a construction that can be deconstructed and rebuilt infinitely. Sarah's legs gave out. She fell to her knees. Elliot walked to a console. The federal facility isn't real. The Neurological Advancement Initiative has been shut down. The co-researchers are being released. They had nothing to do with this. This is just me, just my research, just the proof that consciousness can be anything we want it to be. Why? Sarah asked, barely coherent now. Because I'm dying. I have 2 years, pancreatic cancer, and when I die, I don't want to disappear. So I've been running experiments on how to preserve consciousness, how to back it up, how to transfer it. By the time I die, I'll have a version of myself running in 5 different bodies, scattered across 5 different countries. I'll be immortal. Sarah understood then. This wasn't about advancing science. This was about a man too afraid to die, willing to destroy hundreds of minds to prove that death could be conquered. Sarah's consciousness fractured completely. For one instant, she experienced 7 versions of herself simultaneously. She was kneeling in the facility and standing in the corner watching herself kneel. She was back at the police station and in the hospital and running through the woods and scattered across 7 different people, none of them real. That was the darkest moment. That was the moment when everything should have ended. But then the emergency power shut down. The neuromodulation chairs went dead. The humming stopped. The console went black. A voice came through the facility's PA system. Officer Marcus Webb. Step away from the console. Elliot, you're done. The door burst open. FBI agents, state police, helicopter lights outside the windows. Dr. Patricia Hammond had called them. She'd been waiting for someone to break. She'd been waiting for someone to care enough about a destroyed child to become a whistleblower. Elliot lunged for Sarah. He reached the console desperately. But Sarah, in that moment of desperate clarity, in that moment when she was 7 different people who all understood the same thing, grabbed his hand, and she held it. "You can't run now," Sarah said, her voice layered. 7 people speaking as one. Not anymore. Not ever. Elliot's face changed. For the first time, his composure broke. He saw it then. He understood. The versions of him didn't know each other. He had never actually solved the problem of consciousness death. He had just created a system where pieces of him exist in different places, with no memory of being a complete person. He wouldn't be immortal. He would be fragmented, forever. The other Emilys were brought to specialized medical centers. Neurologists worked around the clock to attempt consciousness reintegration. It was delicate work. Consciousness fragmentation had never been intentionally reversed. They had to essentially rebuild Emily's sense of self from the ground up. Sarah underwent consciousness reintegration too. The process was intense. She had to face what it meant to be 7 people simultaneously, and then choose which parts of those 7 selves to keep, what memories to preserve, what trauma to integrate, what version of Sarah she wanted to be when the process finished. She chose to keep all of it. All 7 instances of consciousness. The detective, the victim, the hunter, the hunted, the witness, the survivor, the broken one. She chose to integrate all of them into a single continuous self. The psychologist said it was dangerous, that she'd have conflicting neural pathways, that she'd struggle with multiple perspectives, all fighting for dominance. But Sarah understood something that Elliot never had. Consciousness wasn't meant to be singular. It was meant to be contradictory. It was meant to hold multiple truths simultaneously. The original Emily Rodriguez regained consciousness after 14 days of intensive neural integration. She remembered everything. She remembered being fragmented. She remembered being 4 different people. She remembered her mother asking Elliot to fix her anxiety. She remembered the first time Elliot showed her the neuromodulation chair and explained what it could do. He had said, "We can make you experience multiple versions of yourself. You could live multiple lives without trauma. You could be happy in all of them." She had wanted it. She had not understood what it meant. She remembered everything, and it was devastating. But her mother was there when she woke up, and her mother was skying, and her mother was saying, "I didn't understand. I didn't understand what I was allowing." Sarah visited her on day 5 of consciousness. Emily asked, "Will I always remember being other people?" "Yes," Sarah said. "Will I ever be just Emily again?" "You'll be Emily and all the others, integrated. You'll be more than you were before, not less." Emily didn't look comforted, but she nodded. The gymnasium doors at Riverside High were sealed. The basement where the neuromodulation lab had been was excavated and cleaned. The equipment was seized as evidence. The servers were delivered to the FBI for analysis. The school was closed for 6 months while every stone was turned over. Every staff member was interviewed. Every student was screened. A year later, they reopened. On the first day back, Sarah Chen stood in the hallway where Emily Rodriguez had disappeared, hallway 3C, the hallway between the math wing and the cafeteria. The security camera was gone. A new one was installed in its place, monitored by human security personnel, not automated systems. No more hidden equipment, no more waiting in white spaces. Emily walked down that hallway. Emily Alpha, the continuous consciousness, the integrated self. For the first time in 3 years, she walked it as a complete person. Sarah watched from the corner. She had come back to the school to close the loop, to be present for the moment when Emily reclaimed the space where she had disappeared. Emily stopped at the exact spot where the disappearance had happened. She closed her eyes. "I'm still here," she said quietly. "All the versions of me, we're all still here, and we're one person now." Sarah had suspected Elliot from the very beginning. She had noticed the way he spoke about consciousness. She had noticed his clinical detachment. She had noticed the research papers on his desk about consciousness preservation and neural backup systems. She had known, but she had not acted on it until it was too late. That was the thing about knowing and acting. They were not the same. Emily opened her eyes and smiled at Sarah. It was a small smile, but it was real. It was the smile of someone who had been broken and put back together by her own hands. "Thank you," Emily said. "I'm sorry it took so long," Sarah replied. "I'm sorry I scattered myself," Emily said, "but I'm glad all the pieces are back." 6 months later, Dr. James Elliott stood trial. He was convicted on 847 counts of assault, 342 counts of battery, 156 counts of reckless endangerment, and 1 count of first-degree murder. The murder was for the version of Emily that had drowned in the lake. His sentence was 1,200 years. He would die in prison, his consciousness still fragmented, scattered across 5 different subjects who had been successfully reintegrated. The versions of Elliot that lived in their brains were slowly being eliminated through targeted neural therapy. By the time Elliot died, there would be nothing left of him. No backup, no immortality, just erasure. Sarah returned to detective work. The neuromodulation incident became part of the official record. Schools across the nation implemented new protections, mandatory consent protocols for any neural or psychiatric treatment of minors, independent oversight committees, transparent communication with parents, regular audits of school facilities. The system changed. Not because the science was wrong, but because the system had been built on trust that should never have been given so freely. Emily graduated high school. She became a neural research advocate. She spoke to other survivors of consciousness manipulation. She helped them understand that fragmentation wasn't the end of identity. It was expansion of self. It was painful, but it was also proof that human consciousness was more resilient than anyone had believed. Years later, Sarah and Emily ran into each other at a coffee shop. "How are you?" Sarah asked. "Still integrated," Emily said, smiling. "Still remembering being 7 different people. Still figuring out what that means." "I know that feeling," Sarah said. They sat together, 2 people who understood what it meant to be multiple and singular simultaneously. 2 people who had survived fragmentation and chosen completeness. Outside the window, the city moved on. The school where it all happened was 3 blocks away. The neuromodulation lab was gone, but the memory remained. The white spaces, the missing minutes, the stolen hours, they were all accounted for now. They were all integrated. There was no more disappearing between classes. There was only memory, continuity, the hard work of becoming yourself again. Sarah looked out the window at her reflection in the glass. For just a moment, she saw the 7 versions of herself overlaid on top of each other. 7 different angles, 7 different expressions, 7 different versions of Sarah Chen, all occupying the same space. She blinked. They integrated. She was one person again. But she would never forget being 7. The girl who disappeared between classes had come back. Not as one Emily, but as every Emily she had ever been. And she was whole. End of story.